Hello again, everyone. Thanks for joining us. It's just about 1 o'clock Eastern by my clock, so we're going to get started. Just a couple of housekeeping things. If you can enter in where it says enter a question for staff, just let us know that you can hear us. So there's a picture of that window on the right side of my screen. It's the GoToWebinar control panel. And under the questions pane, it should look something like this. It might look a little different depending on your operating system, but there's a little field that says enter a question for staff and just say hello. I can see a couple of messages coming through, so thanks very much. And also, during the course of the webinar, if you enter in your questions there, I'll try my best to get to them during the flow of the webinar if they're on topic. If they're a little off topic, that's fine, or if they're a little bit too in depth for me to answer. We do have another colleague on the line, Robin Kamucheka, and she's going to be interacting with you in the chat window. So don't be shy. We love to hear from you live. That's what makes these webinars really fun to do live, right? So let us know your questions or comments, and we're going to be keeping an eye on that chat window throughout. Okay, so this webinar is going to be recorded and it will be put on our YouTube channel as well as on our website. So if you have registered for this webinar, you'll automatically get a link to that recording when it's available, usually within a few days. So don't worry about, taking a ton of notes. Just kind of sit back, relax, try to get an overview of what we're trying to show you today, because we just want to introduce standard operating procedures. Although, they've been in FCS Express since version 6, there's been some enhancements to them made in version 7, and we just thought that would be a great opportunity to show you those, as well as, how to actually build and use SOPs. So moving on to the webinar outline for today, this is what we're going to cover. So first of all, the standard operating procedures feature is included in your basic FCS Express license. You'll find it here on the quality tab, and I'm going to go into how to build an SOP from scratch, but for those of you who are curious at the get-go, it's right up here on the quality tab, and you would build it here with the standard operating procedures button that I'm mousing over. And then when you or other users, whoever the layout is meant for, is ready to run the SOP, they would just click Run SOP, and that'll take them through it. So what are SOPs, actually? I know a lot of you are familiar with them, and a lot of you may not be. So they're a tool in FCS Express to help you standardize your data analysis workflow. So you're familiar with SOPs, of course, in the wet lab portion of your workflow. That might be a binder with like a printed out protocol and a checklist that you have to follow. So we figured, why not carry that principle over into the data analysis steps of your workflow? And so it's a tool that's available directly from within FCS Express, as I've showed you here on the toolbar. And you build your SOP to specifications within FCS Express, and then the end users of the layout that have the SOP, they actually run the SOP from within FCS Express. So it's a tool that will help you kind of maximize the efficiency of your workflow, and it's useful for new and experienced flow cytometrists alike. So you can think about if you have some new employees that you're onboarding and you don't necessarily have the time right away to train them to use your standardized layouts for routine analysis, you can give them this SOP layout, and it'll actually tell them what to do. If you've built it out to be very granular in terms of its instructions, like telling them to load data into the data list, telling them to draw a gate, that can be as granular as you want it to be. So it can help guide new users to learn FCS Express, and in so doing to actually learn how to use the layouts that you've designed in one fell swoop. But it's also useful for experienced flow cytometrists because, we have so many different analyses that we're doing in our lab that, sometimes it's hard to remember exactly the steps for a given type of analysis. Maybe you're doing like a multiplex bead capture assay, or you're doing some sort of titration, and those layouts can be a little more complicated than an average layout. Well, this SOP tool is a great tool for that kind of analysis, and it's basically it'll allow you to walk the user step by step through the workflow. So even if they're already familiar with FCS Express, even if they're an old hand at flow cytometry, it's just another tool to help you standardize your workflow and take some of the stress out of trying to remember what to do, right? Like I said, it's fully customizable, so you can even put in like little pictorial aids in the SOPs to guide users to the right buttons to click on. It can be as detailed as you want it to be, or it can be a loose guide. Maybe you don't want to invest a couple of hours designing the SOP in FCS Express. In a lot of cases, it won't take that long anyway, but maybe you just want to make a quick little SOP that just tells them the basics of, how to get started. And, it assumes that the user knows, has a working knowledge of FCS Express, like they're relatively proficient. In those cases, you don't need to design the SOP to be so granular. So that's totally up to you, what you want to do. So what I'm going to try to show you is a few different examples today. So we're going to be talking about these 3 different examples, and these have a different level of detail in them, you'll see. So that'll sort of illustrate what I was just saying, that you can make it as detailed or as general as you want it to be. So the 3 examples of SOP layouts we're going to show you are for 3 different types of lab environments. One is research, one is quality, one is clinical. The example I'll show you for a research SOP is using some CyTOF data, which is highly multi-parametric. And so a lot of times users don't want to necessarily be building a 10 or 15 page layout from scratch every time they do a similar experiment. So you're probably already familiar with using FCS Express layouts as templates. So this kind of builds on that, but then on top of that, you can put in the SOP, and that'll guide the users on how to use these complex templates, okay? The second example I'll show you is an SOP built for a quality environment. Specifically, it's a bead-based SOP layout for PMT QC template. So in terms of quality control, a lot of times you might be doing various bead-based assays. In this example, it's PMT-based to help you optimize your voltage settings on your cytometer. So I'm not going to get too into detail, about how the layout was built, but I'm just going to show you for those first two layouts, research and quality, I'm going to show you how to use that layout as an SOP end user. In the clinical example, I'm going to go one step further, and we're going to build a simple SOP into it. So the clinical layout's already been built. It's already a reusable template. We're obviously not going to do that together today. That's out of the scope of this webinar, and that itself would take a whole webinar to do, if not more, because as you know, some of these clinical layouts are 15, 20, 30, I could go on and on, even more than 30 pages, right? So we're going to take a layout that's already built, and I'm going to show you how to build an SOP into it, okay? So, and then we'll take that SOP clinical layout that we built together and close it and reopen it and load in new patient files and actually run the SOP and just, enjoy the fruits of our labor together. All right, then we'll do a couple of troubleshooting things too that might come out. Okay, so I see that some of you are interacting with us in the chat window. That is great. Some of you who have logged on a little bit late, thank you for joining us. I just want to point out one more time, and thank you for bearing with me, those of you who are here on time. I just want to point out the questions and answer box once more for a couple of those people who just logged on. So that's shown on the right side of my screen where it says enter a question for staff. I'm highlighting it now. Oops, no, I just moved it. I didn't highlight it. Where it says enter a question for staff. Sorry, my drawing tools are not working anymore. That happens sometimes when I'm on my Mac. You could just enter in questions along the course of the webinar. If I'm talking about something and it's unclear, or you just have some kind of question about what we're doing, enter that in, and I'll either answer you verbally or my colleague Robin, who's on the chat window, she'll answer you through there, okay? And if it's more in depth, we'll follow up with you offline, and we could discuss it on either a screen share, a phone call, or just send you links to our manual as appropriate, okay? So we'd love to hear from you, so definitely interact with us there. Okay, so again, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to show you the first example of a layout, which is the research environment type SOP using highly multiparametric CyTOF data. Okay. Alrighty, so let's open up that layout, I think. So that's going to be right here. I believe it's this one we want to use. So, you know, I think we do have some webinar attendees who are working with Fluidigm data. So whether you're already doing that or, you know, something you're thinking of doing, you know that Fluidigm data, CyTOF data, the whole point of it is that it has a lot of parameters, right? So you're probably already familiar with the utility of using reusable templates. And so this layout not only is a reusable template, it's also been built in with an SOP that tells the end user, who a lot of times might not be proficient in flow cytometry data yet or even proficient in FCS Express, it tells them what to do step by step. So this layout actually has a picture. It even shows them how to access the SOP. So that's optional. We've kind of put that in as an additional bell and whistle. And if that's something that's useful for you, you can contact us and we can let you know how to put that in. There's a little bit of a trick to it because technically it's not part of the SOP itself, okay? So, but it's going to tell the user how to run the SOP. So we're going to just follow this little screenshot here telling us to click on Run SOP. Okay, and this is one of those dockable windows. So just like the batch actions window or the data list, which is already docked on the right, I can dock this on another side of my layout so that it doesn't cover up my plots so much. We'll see more once I close the data list. So it's telling us the first step. And you see this is what it looks like. It's got a step title in orange, and then below that a little bit more of a detailed description. And then below that, let's see if I can get my drawing tools to work, then it has the in-depth instructions, okay? And, you know, when we build the SOPs, I'll show you that, you know, not all of these elements are required. You can just have, you know, one or two of these if you don't feel like you need to be so in detail, okay? But this one's been built out to a pretty high level of completion. So it's actually telling us to add the data files you'd like to analyze into the layout, and it's assuming the person has no knowledge of FCS Express, so it actually tells you, you know, to use the blue plus here in the data list on the right. I have it docked on the right side of my window to browse to the data file, so let's do that together. Okay, so we're going to take these two and say okay. Before I do that, before I say okay and load the data files into the data list, you see, if I try to go to the next step here, which is down here at the bottom, these left and right arrowheads, do you see the mouse over hover text? When I mouse over that right arrow, it says, cannot advance to the next step. See, I try to click next, it actually won't let me go because the SOP was built to sense the number of data files in the data list, okay? So let me go and load those in for real this time, and you'll see that it's going to let us go forward. Okay, so now you see it says the condition for advancing to the next step is satisfied. I'm sorry, my drawing tools are not cooperating, but towards the bottom of the SOP window. And now if I mouse over the little right arrowhead, it says next step, and it's going to let me go on to the next step. So I'm going to do that. And it says adjust gates for your populations. If necessary, the gate on each plot can be moved and resized. We've even got a little hint here saying that, you know, you can maximize a plot, and that helps you adjust the gates a little bit more precisely, right? Because the plot's bigger. And it says, even tells you to click restore when you're done. Okay, so, you know, I'm going to assume that all these gates are fine, and I'm just going to go to the next step. And this is going to take us through building more plots. So I'm just going to do a couple of these steps with you to give you a general idea. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. All right, so let's close this data list. I don't think we need that open anymore. So it's telling us to make the final plot in the cleanup strategy. So again, this is CyTOF data. There's a lot of parameters. We can take a look at the list here. So many parameters, right? So typically with CyTOF data, you've got 5 to 12 or more plots on the first page where you're just doing your basic cleanup, like on the beads, the residual, center, event length, all that. So this layout's been built to a partial cleanup strategy, and this next step is having us build the last cleanup plot. Okay, so it's telling us to insert a new plot from this one here, to just grab this gate and drag it out to create a new plot, and even tells us to move it over so that things look nice and neat. Okay, and then it's going to tell us go to the next step. And this is a pretty loose SOP in the sense that you see that the permissions are not really tamped down. So you'll see that in the bead SOP layout for quality environment and in the clinical layout we built together, it actually doesn't, we're going to build it so it doesn't let you go to the next step unless you have like a certain number of events in the gate in question. So you can tamp all those down so that it really fits it enhances the QC of your workflow, right? So that it's more standard. That's the point of a standard operating procedure. But since this is a research-based SOP, there's a little more flexibility generally in purely research environments, and so it hasn't been tamped down. That's why I'm able to just kind of go to the next step without checking how many events I have in my gate and that kind of thing. But you can put in those restrictions even in a research-based SOP layout, and it doesn't matter, whether you have a research license or a research use only or a commercial clinical license. That doesn't matter. Okay, you can tamp things down as little or as much as you want in those SOPs. Okay, so anyway, so now it's telling us to change the parameter on this new plot to 193 on the y-axis. So let's do a couple of these things. And now it's saying to draw a new gate. And you see it has these pictorial aids, right? Because it's assuming that the user doesn't even know how to draw a gate. So if you have a situation like that, you can put in these pictorial aids. It's very easy just using the clipboard. I'll show you how to do that when we build it together. Let's draw our new gate here. And I'll call this cleanup DNA 2. Whoops, there we go. Just change it to a red color to match. Okay, great. So let's just do one or two more of these steps together, then we'll move on. So then it's saying to click on the next page. So the layout was created with an empty page. So you might want to do something like this if you're creating a layout for your colleagues, and there's the first part of the analysis, which is fairly standardized, whether that's like a cleanup or some basic part of your immunophenotyping, but you want to leave like some blank pages for the more specialized subset analysis or whatever it is that's particular to that experiment. You can do something like that where it's partially built out, and that's what this has done. So let me just expand this so we can see the title. So it's saying the next step is to create a new plot gated on cleanup DNA 2. So I'm following the steps here in the instruction where it says choose insert tab, etc. So we're going to put in our histogram, and it's telling us the third step here is to change the x-axis of the parameter to 154 SM CD45. So I'll do that. And it's telling us in step 4 to gate this histogram on that cleanup DNA 2 gate that we just made together. So let's do that. Okay, and we'll go to the next step, and I'm just going to take you through building the next 2D plot and maybe a gate, and then we'll call it a day for this one. Okay, so telling us to make a marker, and I'm going to go through this kind of fast just because I am familiar with it, but I'm basically following the steps that it's telling us to do. Okay, and we'll click next. And now it's saying to insert a new color dot plot. So let's do that beside this plot here. And to gate it on CD45, which is linked to that marker that we just made. There we go. Okay, and to change the x-axis to CD20. So a lot of these steps I'm showing you, they're relevant to even a quality or clinical environment. This is just basic plot building, right? So hopefully there's a little something here for everybody, no matter what environment you're in. And okay, and so it says, once you've changed the axes, it should resemble the plot below. And you see it doesn't look exactly like it because this SOP was built with different data files. So this screenshot you have in this orange SOP window, it's a little bit different than the plot we have it right, but it looks quite similar and it lets the user know they're on the right track to using this layout. So I'm going to click next. And now here it's just telling you to start building out these gates. So I'm just going to build one of them, just the CD3 gate. Okay, I'll even make it a nice forest green so it matches this screenshot, right? Okay, so I'm not going to do all of these steps anymore because I think you get the general idea, but I'm just going to quickly kind of toggle through this workflow and it has you build out, I think, 3 or 4 plots. It's sort of an abbreviated workflow because this is the 7-color CyTOF kit, even though a lot of parameters are required. But, there's similar templates that we have on our website for the full MDIPA full immunophenotyping kit, with 50-some usable parameters, etc. So then this is telling the user to display the summary statistics, okay, and then here in the last step, it's telling them to come up to the batch tab and click run. And then that would basically run this batch action, which is exporting the entire layout, both 2 pages, out to PowerPoint. Okay, so I am not going to do that. Well, I guess I could do it. Let's just check. Whoops. Let's just check where this is exporting. All right, yeah, I guess that's fine. So we can run it, and it tells them to just run the PowerPoint and then open the PowerPoint and examine it and make sure it looks how they want, and it has a congratulations message. Okay, so it's going through both iterations here because we had 2 different files that we added to our data list at the beginning. Okay, so here's the PowerPoint that opened up. And so we have these first 2 slides here for file 1, and then the second 2 slides for file 2. Okay, so and then once the user is done with the SOP, you see that it says at the bottom here, the condition for completing the final step is satisfied. I've just circled that in red. Okay, and then they can just click next, and the SOP will close. All right, so that's SOPs in a nutshell. Just wanted to take you through running one almost completely. If there's any questions, just enter it in. I'll just leave that open in the background in case any more questions come up. Let me show you one more example rather briefly before we start building a clinical type SOP together. Okay, so the second example I want to show you is a SOP, as I mentioned, that was designed more for a quality environment, specifically a bead-based PMT quality control template to help the operator optimize their voltage settings. So let's open that up. Okay, so this is actually with some serotech data. So I believe that's opening up. Okay, let's just give it a minute here. All right, so let's run our SOP again. This one's going to be a little bit different, so it's telling us to load data, the six-peak bead data into the data list. And I have that data list there on the left, so we will load that in. And again, this one, it wouldn't let us go to the next step until we load in the data. So let's do that together. Okay, so we can click next and go to the next step. So it's asking us to verify that the beads gate is capturing the appropriate bead population for proper evaluation. So that's this one here, this plot on the left, and of course the user can then move the gate around, and then there's an additional safeguard here that the layout author put in. It's a little checkbox where it's not going to let us go to the next step until the user here clicks that the beads gate has been confirmed. So that's using our checkbox custom tokens. We do have a separate manual page about that. I'm not going to show how to build that today because it's actually, you don't really need to do that for the SOP. You can also build in different restrictions into the SOP itself, such as like requiring that there's 500,000 events or whatever you would deem appropriate in the beads gate. So that's that's something you can do either way. But that's an important point, is that the SOPs are integratable with all the other features in FCS Express. So you can have them all work together so that your quality control is as tight and multifaceted as you want it to be. Okay, so now it's going to let us go to the next step, and it's asking us to verify the FCS markers. And it's specifically asking here on this part of on the right side of the layout page, do each of the FCS markers have at least 1,000 events? And it says yes, so I could go. But let me just show you what happens if I move one of these FCS markers here off to the portion of the plot where there's not enough events. You see now it's telling us, no, there's not enough events. Somebody put in a custom token there. And if I try to go to the next step, you see it says, cannot advance to the next step in that hover text there in the lower right corner, right? So let me put that marker back. I'm just going to click undo, and then it'll let us go. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all of these, but basically there's going to be questions and markers for all of the channels that are being analyzed here in the workflow, and there's various pages. You can make the relevant pages pop up depending on what step of the SOP you're on. That's a little bit more in detail than I have time to get through in today's webinar, but I just want you to know that that's a possibility, and we have full documentation in our manual. And so if you want to try that out and you have any issues, that's something that we'd love to hear from you at support@denovosoftware.com, and we'll just kind of help you wherever the issue is. Okay, so yeah, I'm not going to go through this in the interest of time. I want to spend more time on the clinical layout because that's the one we're actually going to build together. But I just wanted to show you this example of a layout that is designed specifically for a quality environment, right? If there's any questions, please enter them in. We'll be glad to interact with you there in the chat window, or I'll address them verbally if I can. Okay? So I'm going to close that just so my rather modest 8 GB laptop doesn't start complaining that I have too many layouts open and such. All right, let's close this one too. Okay, so now let's actually open up a clinical layout that it's already a template, it already has data loaded, but it doesn't have an SOP in it. So we're going to build that together. And the point I want to make before we do that is that the clinical layout can be fully integrated with your permissions and your alerts. So if you want to make the SOP, if you want to safeguard the SOP so that it can only be edited by, certain security groups. If you're using a clinical commercial license, you're using a network license most likely, and you probably have security groups with like users, standard users, administrators. If you want to make sure that the SOP itself, the steps within the SOP, cannot be amended by anybody except for, let's say, supervisors, you can tamp that down in permissions. Okay, I'm not going to actually show you how to do it, but I just want to show you here in permissions rules that there is a separate subcategory here for the SOPs. You see where it says SOP operations. So you can prevent or permit, however you want to do it, those various things, adding, deleting, editing SOP steps, etc. Okay? Also, by the same token, no pun intended, you can integrate your alerts into the SOPs, so you can make the SOP tell the user to run the alerts, right? So we have alerts up here on the quality tab as well. I'm pointing to it with this arrow, although I don't think that's showing up. Hold on. So these that I'm circling in red, some of you who are in regulated environments, whether it's clinical or not, you might be using alerts to make sure that everything is, everything is as expected in the layout. So if you're in a clinical environment, you might have an alert to make sure you don't have a patient mismatch, i.e. that all the tubes in a panel are actually coming from the patient John Smith or Jane Doe, but not both, right? You might have another alert to make sure that your viability is good enough to continue, that kind of thing. So you can make the SOP tell the user to run the alerts. And then even some of the custom tokens that the alerts are based on, you can kind of call them out specifically in the SOPs and like tamp down the ability to go to the next step if that condition's not satisfied. Okay, so don't think of the SOP as a tool where you have to throw away all the other quality type features that you've put into your layout. Not at all. They interact with each other. It's not about duplicating work, but it's just about tying it all together into an SOP workflow. Okay? It's not going to be that you have to rewrite your custom tokens or anything like that. We would never want users to have to do that, considering how much work goes into a lot of these elaborate layouts. Okay, so let me go ahead without further ado and actually open that clinical layout that we'll be working with today. And I think it's this one. Excuse me. You'll just have to be patient for a couple of moments because this is a 15-page layout, and like I said, I'm just working on a modest 8 GB RAM laptop here, so it's not going to open up instantaneously, but I don't think it's going to take that long. Okay, and I do see a question from Jay about rerunning SOP. I will show you how to run an SOP. I think I know what you're asking about, Jay. It's whether you want to like rerun the SOP from completion or from where you started, from where you left off. So yeah, that will come up a little bit later. So I'll try to address your question there. And thanks for entering that in. Okay, so this is a layout. It's got a lot of pages. Let me show you all the data that's associated with it. It's a clinical layout, so it's got these 6 different tubes associated with this one patient, a couple of B-cell tubes, isotype, myeloid, TNK, and then a specimen tube. Okay, and so this has already been built. It's got a few different interesting things going on, which let me show you for context, just so that when we build the SOP together, you'll kind of know what I'm referring to. So this is the summary page, and if I go to a 2-page view, you'll see where some of these classification tokens in the tables come from. Okay, so right here, we've got a viability assessment token that I'm circling in red. You see it says unacceptable, and that's coming from this PI plot on the viability page. And just to show you how this works, this is of course a user-defined, it's a user-defined classification, right? That's a scientific judgment, so that's not something FCS Express puts in, but the layout author defined viability, good viability as above 90% and suboptimal between 50 to 89 and unacceptable 0 to 50. Okay, and so you can see that these verbal classifications are going to change if I move this quadrant, or, in reality, in most cases, you'd be loading a different sample, right? That's what would cause it to change. You probably might do some minor adjustments of quadrants, but I'm doing something pretty major here just to show you, that would be a good viability, right? And then if I move it to the middle, suboptimal. So these are the things we're going to refer to in our SOP. We're going to prevent the user from going on to the next step unless the viability is good, okay? Another thing we'll do is we will make sure that the limps gate here has enough events, and we can define however many events we think is acceptable, right? And another thing we will do in the SOP is calling out some of the things that we're doing in the alerts. So if I click on alerts, let's see what we have. So there's a 519 co-expression, hematogonus. We'll probably skip those. Let's just keep it simple. We'll do something related to the viability and related to the patient mismatch check, okay, to make sure that like all of the tubes here in the data list, that they all come from Jane Doe, okay, or John Smith, but not both, right? So let's, as a first step, let's save this layout as unlinked. I mean, you probably in reality will already have an unlinked version of your reusable template, even if you haven't started building SOPs, right? Because the whole point of a reusable template is you're reusing it a lot, so you have an unlinked version where the plots are empty, and that's what you use on a routine basis, okay? But I'm just going to, just, do that part with you right now, just so we know that it's coming from this exact layout, okay? So we're going to go File, Save As, we're going to say Unlinked, and I'll call this Clinical Layout Unlinked SOP webinar, okay? So let's close and reopen that. Okay, I don't know why it's, I thought I did just save it. Let me just do that one more time. File, Save As. Yes, okay. Unlinked, okay. Okay, so let's close that. Okay, great. I guess I didn't really save it last time. All right, so that should be in my recent docs. So we're going to open it. It's going to come out empty, and now we're going to do what you've all been waiting for. We're going to build the SOP together, okay? And I'm not going to make this really complicated. I mean, you saw it was a 15-page layout. I'm not going to build this SOP out to the real specifications that addresses like all of the concerns on all of the pages and plots, right? That would take too long. Just giving you a general idea about how to do this on your own. Okay, so this is of course empty. That's expected because we've saved it unlinked. Let's go to the Quality tab and click on Standard Operating Procedures, and we'll build this out together. So, this is just like FCS Express has in all its other windows. We've got these little mouse over hints, so don't feel like you need to memorize what all of these say or necessarily even consult the manual. Just mouse over and it's going to give you hints. So the blue plus is create a new SOP step. We'll do that. You can name it, or if you forget to name it right there, you can just right click on it and say rename, And we're going to say the first step is load data into data list. Okay, and now we can enter in a short description, like load patient tubes in correct order. This is a resizable window, so we can do this. So we can put in some instructions here. You can make this like as detailed as you want. You can come up here to the text tab and actually make this like a numbered steps here by clicking on the 1, 2, 3. Whoops. So we can say open data list, load data, and I believe we highlight both of these. There we go, yeah. So now it's numbered. And you know, you could put in more. You can put in a screenshot if you want to. Well, let's save the screenshot for another step, okay? And now let's put in a restriction that they can't go on to the next step unless they load the correct number of tubes in the data list. So this is a 6-tube panel. So we're going to make FCS Express require the SOP user to load in 6 tubes, okay? So that token here is under layout. You would say number of files in data list and say equals 6. That's the syntax there. All right, let's do a save just so we don't lose our work. Okay, let's put in another step, and the next step will be adjust lymph gate, and we'll say move red lymph gate on first page. Okay, so why don't I put this over here so we can see. So it's going to be this plot right here, this plot on the summary page, and you know, we can put in a picture of that plot if we wanted to. You know, if you want to, you can, if you had the original layout still open, you could grab a screenshot from that and put it in there. Why don't we do that actually? So let me just open that back up. I'm sorry, I closed that. Okay. Just bear with me, just take a couple moments to reopen. Okay, so you know, in this case, why don't I move the lymph gate so that it's in a better position so that the screenshot will be a little bit more correct. So I'm just doing a screen grab with my native screen grab program on my Mac here. And so now that image is in my clipboard, and I can say, you know, adjust, whoops, red lymph gate so it looks like below and has greater than, you know, let's say 6,000 events. Okay, so now to put in your picture, you can just right-click and say insert picture, and then you can navigate to a JPEG file or whatever you have on your computer. So I'm not going to do that though because I have that in my clipboard because I just took a screenshot. So I'm just going to right-click and say paste. Okay, and now you have a little thumbnail image that will help the user find the correct plot, right? Because especially on a 15-page layout, it's not that obvious. Why don't we make this a little bit bigger? So you can right-click on the plot and say Format Picture and go to Position and Size. Let's check off this. Whoops, sorry about these drawing tools. Let's erase those. Okay. You can check this Scale Proportionally button checkbox right here, and then we can change the rather than 14%, why don't we make it a little bit bigger, like 35%, and say okay. All right, so now that's, you know, easier to see. You could make it even bigger if you wanted to. So let's put in that requirement that it has 6,000 events in the lymph gate. So in order to do that, as you know, tokens, statistics, they're plot-based in FCS Express, so we need to get the plot number from that plot so that we can make the lymph gate token be based on that plot that we're adjusting the gate on. So to find the plot number, you can just kind of hover your mouse over that plot while it's not selected. Right? So no layout selected in your no objects selected in your layout. Hover your mouse over that plot. You see it says 182 in that tiny kind of manila covered hover text, right? So let's do that. So we're going to say insert token, statistic, and we'll scroll down to plot 182 and come to the statistic, and we'll choose lymphs, number of events, and say OK. And now we're going to put greater than 6,000. So that way the user won't be able to go to the next step unless there's at least 6,000 events. Okay, so now let's also do one for the viability. Okay. So remember, this viability assessment could be good, suboptimal, or unacceptable. We're going to put in a new step to require it to be good. So let's do that. Create a new step. So we'll say viability. So the first thing is to adjust the viability quad as appropriate. And here you can even tell them, go to viability page and adjust quad. Oops. On PI plot, right? You can make this as detailed as you want. I'm keeping it a little bit brief, just in the interest of time, but you can put in multiple steps there, just like we did in the earlier step. And let's put in that condition, okay? So let's check what is the name of this token, because we need to use the same terminology. So I'm just going to double click on it here in the table, and I see that the token is called, I think it's just called here viability. Whoops. Okay, let's cancel out of that because I don't know what I clicked there. But yeah, we'll put in that token, insert token, viability. There it is in our custom tokens list, and say OK. And we'll say it's got to be greater than 89 because I'm just following the classification levels that the layout author put in that I originally showed you, where good was 90 or above, okay? We could even be, 89.99, whatever. Okay, so that's fine. Then the next step we'll do is let's tell them to run the alerts, okay? Whoops. So we'll say go to quality tab. I'm sorry, I can't type and speak at the same time. And run alerts. And here we can put in one of those screenshots too, okay? So like this. Okay, just paste that in. Not sure what happened there. Let's try one more time. Okay. Let me just expand that. I'm not sure why that got so smushed like that. But anyway, there you go. And I'm not going to put a condition here. I think the reminder is sufficient. And then we can also tell them to, well, we can put in that it doesn't let them actually continue unless the alerts match. Okay, so I'm just going to put it in for one of the alerts, specifically the patient mismatch check. Okay, so I think we do have that as a custom token, and this is just reiterating what I said before, that the standard operating procedures, it's easy to integrate them with the custom tokens and the other kind of QC elements you've already incorporated into your layout. So let me come down here into, I think this is the one we want to use, this custom ID check, custom token ID check, okay, which is based on this ID alert Okay, so it's just checking if like the patient ID is the same for all of the tubes. Okay, so let's put in that custom ID check, custom token ID check, I'm sorry, like that. And we'll say it should equal -1, which is true in coding syntax. Okay, that's all detailed in our manual as well. And then the last step we'll run is, last step we'll put into the SOP rather, is telling the user to run the batch. So in general, what I've seen with the clinical labs I've worked with, they usually have some batch actions lined up where they're exporting to PDF, maybe they're even exporting out to LS or LIMS systems. You know, maybe they're even making an Excel or exporting some pictures. In our case, we just have a simple PDF exporting to our desktop, and it's going to be named the patient result from that date. Okay, a lot of times you'll have the patient name in the title as well. Okay, I just have the date for illustrative purposes. So we're just going to tell them to, you know, run batch before closing layout. So we could say go to batch tab, whoops. Okay, and again, I could put a picture here. I'm not going to because I've already done that a few times. But that's it, yeah. So let's save that, and okay. So we're going to close this, and we're going to, I think I just saved it. I'm going to save it one more time because I'm paranoid like that before I close it and reopen it, and we run it together. Okay, so I guess that's saved. So let's close that and reopen it. Okay, so this is empty as expected. So let's pretend we're now, you know, a new tech in the lab. We don't really even know how to use FCS Express very well, if at all. The supervisor has just given the SOP layout to the tech and told them to go forth and analyze, okay? So as long as they know to just, you know, click on View, Run SOP, it should tell them what to do. So it's going to say, load data into the data list. Let me dock this on the right again so it's not in our way. Okay, so we'll open up the data list. It could have even told them to go to the data tab. I didn't type in all those instructions. And so you see down here, it's telling us that it needs to have 6 tubes, right? The condition for advancing to the next step is not satisfied because I don't have 6 tubes in here. Don't worry about, it just says 0 equals 6. It's just showing the actual values of the tokens, but what it's really comparing is that number of files in the data list token to the actual number of files in the data list. Okay, so let's go ahead and load in our files. Okay, and just for illustration, I'm going to only load in 4 files and see what happens. Okay, so get that message. So I've loaded in 4 files. Give the layout a minute to load. So it's loaded some plots with data, right? There is some missing data in the tables because we're missing some tubes. So I try to click next. It's not letting me go. See, it will not let me go to the next step. So let me just click undo. That's the easiest thing. And for real, load in the 6 required files now. Okay, so now it says the condition is satisfied. It's got 6 equals 6 tubes. So I can click next. And it's asking me to adjust the red lymph skate so that it has, I think we just have some quad text boxes showing here. Let's just, let me just get rid of those real quick. Must have clicked on hidden items by accident. Sorry about that. So it's not letting me go because I don't have enough events in my lymph skate. So let's move my lymph skate so that it actually encompasses the population. And that looks a lot better. And I can go to the next step. And you see it had if I go to the previous step, see it has the screenshot that we put in together and that we resized, and that helps the user find the correct plot. Okay, so on to the next step. Adjust viability quad as appropriate. So you see it's not letting me go to the next step again. If I try to click on this, you see the hover text in the lower right corner says cannot advance because the viability is unacceptable. Okay, I've highlighted it there in the table. So let's go to our viability tube, our viability plot. And we're going to adjust our quad so that it fits the population. Come back here to the table. Let's just check what it says there in the table. Okay, great. So now it says that the viability assessment is good, right? And I can click next. It's going to let me go to the next step. Okay, so here it's asking us to run the alerts. And remember I mentioned, you don't necessarily have to put in a description. Like you do have to put in a step title, which you're seeing here in orange where it says run alerts when we built the layout. But I didn't put in a shorter description for this one, and that's fine. You don't have to if you don't feel that you need it. But it's telling us to go to the quality tab and run alerts. So let's go quality and click run alerts. Like, oh, great, it said all alerts passed. Excellent. So I can click continue. It's going to let us go to the next step also. And you see here it was actually, not only did it tell us to run the alerts, but do you remember where we set up that step? And I'm sorry, I can't get my drawing tools to work, but here at the bottom of the SOP window in orange on the right, it says the condition for advancing to the next step is satisfied. And there it was checking that the custom token, the ID check, which is checking like the sample data name or the patient ID, whatever your terminology is that you use in your lab, that it's the same among the tubes in the panel. Okay, so it's integrating with your custom tokens and it's telling the user to manually run the alert. So it's another safeguard for you. So we can click next, and now it's saying run the batch before closing the layout. So here you could even put in one of those checkbox tokens on the layout page itself. Remember, like I showed you in the QC bead layout, the PMT QC bead layout, where it was actually making the user check the checkbox saying, yes, I have arranged the FTSE markers so that there's 1,000 events in each marker. You could put in one of those checkbox tokens on this layout. We haven't done that just because it's a little bit out of the scope of using SOPs per se, but we do have a short video, I think it's 3 or 4 minutes long, that shows you how to use those checkbox tokens and other specific type of custom tokens that you might want to use in these environments, okay? So we could put in a checkbox saying, asking the user, did you run the batch? That would be yet another safeguard. But here the SOP is telling them to run the batch, which is probably good enough in most cases, okay? So we're going to go up to batch and click run. All right, and it's going to start making that PDF. Okay, and the PDF action only was for the first page, but that's sort of irrelevant to today's topics. You could make the PDF be all the pages in the layout. We didn't. So when you click next, there's no more steps in the SOP, and it'll just close. And so that's it. So, so Jay, actually the question that I think you had was, like, let's say you've run the SOP, and now if I come over here and I click run SOP again, you get something like this. The SOP was previously run to completion. Do you wish to restart the SOP? So yeah, you can just click restart, but if you want to avoid getting that message in the in the reusable empty template that you're actually distributing to end users, what you need to do is come into the standard operating procedures builder here and click this little button here. You see the sort of recycle type of looking button here. And if you mouse over, it says reset SOP run status. So if you click that and then resave the layout, when you close and reopen it, you won't get that message, because what that's doing is it's refreshing the status. So that way the layout won't remember that the SOP has been previously run, either to completion or to partial, doesn't matter. You know, then you won't get that message. So you see I clicked run SOP and I didn't get the message. So that's the key to getting rid of that. So, and if I didn't answer your question, oh, I see I did. Okay, great. I'm glad. Thanks for confirming. If anybody else has any other questions, please let me know. I did something I rarely do. I took the whole hour. I'm sorry for that. Usually like to leave a minute or two at the end to summarize what we talked about. But for those of you who still have time, I wanted to point out that you can email us anytime at support@denovosoftware.com. I'm typing that out here. Our response is guaranteed within 24 business hours, but usually we respond much quicker, even within a couple of hours, okay? And if you have not downloaded a demo of FCS Express, please go to denovosoftware.com here, or just Google FCS Express, and then click on free demo, which I'm circling in red up here at the top. Why don't I highlight it since I'm on a red page, highlighting it in yellow. And then you'll get a free, fully functional 30-day demo of FCS Express, and you can try out SOPs or anything else. But definitely contact us if you need help. But if you're the kind of person who likes to figure things out on your own a little bit, we do have a great bank of resources for you to teach yourself. So if you just go to File, well, actually, first of all, if you just open up the startup screen, which will launch by default when you open FCS Express, if you click on Video Guide here in blue, which I'm hovering my mouse over, although I don't think you can see it. Let's see. Yeah, okay, anyway. It says the second column, Video Guide. That will launch a bank of 3-minute topical videos. So there'll be like, I think there's a short video about, to tell you the truth, I'm not sure if there's a short video about SOPs, but there's short videos about lots of things. If you want to get to our full manual, you can click here on Help and Manual, the little purple square here, and that will take you to our manual online. And while on a Mac, it's opening up in a PDF. On a PC, it'll open up in a different floating window that's a little bit easier to search. Either way, you can also just go to File, Help, Tutorials. Okay, sorry, it's because I'm in a beta version. It's doing that. But anyway, it'll take you to this page. Okay, this tutorial page looks like, and then you can just type in SOP, and there'll be a whole bunch of results here. Like, so if I click on this 5th link here, creating the SOP, you see that it kind of shows you an example of how to do that, and then you can click on the parent topic and just get to the full list of subtopics there, all the contents about SOPs in our manual, okay? So try it out. I think it's a really useful tool. You see that the clinical one we built together, it took a few minutes. So if you're building it out in more detail, obviously it'll take longer, but I think it's time well spent, because in the end it's going to save your coworkers a lot of time. Especially if you have various personnel and they're all going to need training at some point. This will definitely simplify that process and give you confidence that all the work in your lab is following the SOPs, and it's following the workflows that you've laid out. Okay? So thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. It was nice having you here with us. Again, this recording will be put online, and you'll all receive a link to it when it's available. So if there's nothing else, thank you so much. I will hang out for a few minutes in case there's any questions, and I'm keeping my eye on the chat window in that case. But if not, have a lovely afternoon, and thanks again. I do see a question from Nicholas asking, can we set CV requirements with SOPs? Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So any type of statistic that you see in FCS Express you can base the requirements in your SOPs on that. So if I open up a basic statistics window here, I only had showed, basing it on like percent of gated cells, but sure, we have these XCV and YCV, and of course that's referring to the X and the Y parameters of the plots. So as long as you find the plot, it's probably a histogram, I'm guessing, find a specific plot whose CV you want to base the requirement on, and just choose appropriate X or Y, whether it's the Y, it's probably X if we're talking about a histogram. And yeah, you can just build in the tokens the same way.